why Manchester City should do a swap deal for this Bayern Munich player, how Liverpool can replace their midfield, and the £100 million duo that Chelsea should sign up front. So this is going to be a two-part video, and in this part I'll be talking about who I would sign for Manchester City, Liverpool and Chelsea, the top 3 title contenders for next season. The second part to this video will be where I talk about Manchester United, Arsenal and Tottenham signings. That video should be out in the next few days and will be linked in the description below when it is. But before I go any further, if you need a place where you can keep up to date with the latest transfer news, find all the match stats you need from games across the globe, and watch highlights and stream live football matches, then you need to download the OneFootball app. I use the OneFootball app because it's completely free, and not only do they have stats and transfer news, but they also have videos to watch and articles to read, which is where I get a lot of my ideas for new videos. And as I said before, you can stream live football matches and watch highlights all on the app. Downloading the OneFootball app will help support the channel as well, so I'll leave it linked in the description below. We'll start off with the two main title contenders, and just to say, this video was written before the news of Marc Cucurella and Calvin Phillips potentially going to Manchester City was broken, but you can see who I would have signed instead, and then I'll talk about Phillips and Cucurella at the end of the segment as well. Now, Manchester City have already brought in Erling Haaland in a deal that, once you factor in external fees paid to Haaland and his agent and his wage package as well, is probably in a deal worth around £150 million. I think this is potentially one of the best signings City have ever made, so I'm going to give it an A star, as I truly think it's a game changer for the next decade or so. And along with Julian Alvarez, who they signed from River Plate in January, I think City have given Pep 2 A star signings up top. Now, City don't exactly need a complete rebuild of their side, more of just a refresher. The truly elite sides continue to push to improve their squad even when they are winning titles and trophies, and that's what I think Manchester City have to be looking to do. So the players I think Pep should look to shift are Raheem Sterling, who could probably bring in around £40 million, with Chelsea looking to sign him. Gabriel Jesus, I'd say around £45 million, with Arsenal and Tottenham both interested. Fernandinho's obviously already departing, and I also think Alexander Zinchenko could bring in around £25 million, and they could get a better upgrade for that same money. And so that would be around £110 million brought in from player sales. I would then look to bring in Rafael Guerreiro from Dortmund, who has 1 year left on his contract, so would probably cost around £20 to £25 million, and also bring in Ibrahim Sangare for around £30 million, as well as Serge Gnabry as well, who has 1 year left on his contract, and so would be attainable for between £50 and £60 million. Giving City a total spend of £250 million and a net spend of around £140 million, which, was being a lot, isn't an absurd amount, I would say, particularly if City could do a Guerreiro-Zinchenko swap deal and a Sterling-Gnabry swap deal, if it worked out better like that financially. This would be City's starting lineup and depth: Ederson behind a back 4 of Laporte and Diaz, with Ake and John Stones a backup, with both Guerreiro and Cancelo capable of playing as inverted or overlapping fullbacks, with Kyle Walker another option at right back, and Cancelo is capable of moving over to the left when needed as well. Rodri would be the starting regista, with Sangare a very good alternative, who will give City a different type of player in midfield, a player who has the physicality and the defensive attributes to play in a double pivot alongside Rodri if needed. Ahead you would have 2 of either De Bruyne, Gundogan or Bernardo Silva. In behind a front 3 of Foden and Gnabry either side of Erling Haaland, with Julian Alvarez, Jack Grealish and Riyad Mahrez all great options from the bench as well. Youngsters like 20-year-old Tommy Doyle, who I do think could be a long-term replacement for Kevin De Bruyne, and 19-year-old James McAtee, who seems like a David Silva regen, should both be given opportunities in the first part of the season and integrated into the first team squad. Whereas someone like Liam Delap is a player who I think should go on loan to the Championship, as I don't think he's going to get the adequate game time that he needs at City to develop. However, rather than Guerreiro and Sangare, which was my suggestions for the left back and defensive midfield positions, City do now look close to signing both Marc Cucurella and Calvin Phillips. Now, I think that Sangare is a much better option than Calvin Phillips, and he'd cost less money as well. And whilst I would prefer Rafael Guerreiro, I do think that Marc Cucurella is a very good option at left back, so I definitely like that transfer a lot more than the Calvin Phillips one. For Liverpool, they've already brought in Darwin Núñez, which I think is to be a long-term replacement to Mo Salah, who still has just 1 season to go on his current contract, so would leave on a free next summer as it currently stands. In regards to this, I actually think it's a good move from the Liverpool board, as Salah is going to be signing a new deal if he does, that would see him earn £20.8 million per year. At the moment, the highest earner for Liverpool is Van Dijk, with £11.4 million per year, with Thiago and Salah in second with £10.4 million, so so Salah's new deal would almost double Liverpool's current highest salary and would mean the likes of Van Dijk, Trent and Thiago will be expecting to earn around that level from here on out. I think if this is Salah of 3 seasons ago, you give him that contract. However, I actually think that Salah is on the decline, which I may do a future video about, so subscribe to the channel for that. But I just think that whilst he is still a world-class player without doubt, he is slowly declining, and I don't see him being able to sustain what he's done over the past 3 seasons over the next 3. And so like Sir Alex Ferguson did with Beckham and Van Nistelrooy, and tried to do with Rooney, Liverpool are doing the same with Salah, and I wouldn't be opposed to them keeping him for another season, but allowing him to leave next summer on a free, with Darwin Núñez the perfect replacement from a tactical point of view, being just as effective from the right side as he is from the left in my opinion. From here, I think Liverpool's front line is pretty much sorted, because after Salah, Firmino and Mane, Núñez and Luis Diaz will be the wide forwards, with Diego Jota taking over from Roberto Firmino as a false 9. So whilst I'm not the biggest fan of Darwin Núñez, I do think he's a signing that makes sense, even though I do think that he is overpriced by about £30 million, and Christopher Nkunku, who'd cost around £10 million less than Núñez at probably £65 million, would have been a better fit. And so if I had to give it a school grade, I'd probably give it a C. Not terrible, but not that great a transfer either. Like with the forward line, Liverpool also need to replace their midfield line with players like Fabinho, Thiago and Henderson all needing long-term replacements. In this midfield three, Henderson is very much the ball progressor, and on occasion being more of a creator in the attack, with Thiago being the ball progressor but from deeper positions, and Fabinho being the side's ball winner. Naby Keita is capable of filling in for Thiago, not being as good as he is at creating from deeper positions, but being more of an industrious box-to-box central midfielder. Both Curtis Jones and Fabio Carvalho will be fighting for Henderson's spot as the most advanced of the three-man midfield, with Curtis Jones probably being the first player to alternate with Henderson, and Carvalho being a further alternative from there. Harvey Elliott could play in that role in the midfield three also, but it could also be used in the front three, or potentially in another position which I will come on to after I talk about the player that I would bring into Liverpool's midfield three, which is Kudai Okone, who'd probably cost around £35 million, and would be the perfect long-term replacement for Fabinho. He's still only 21 years old, and his FB Ref report from the last 365 days at Borussia Mönchengladbach shows he excels defensively, being a high-energy player who makes tackles, can apply pressure, and also ranks incredibly highly for interceptions, which shows his ability to read the game, which is exactly what you want from your central player in the midfield three. So he'll be the defensive linchpin out of possession, but in possession he'll also provide the ability to carry the ball through the centre of the pitch, as he ranks incredibly highly for dribbles as well as recording impressive numbers for progressive passes and progressive carries. With Kone to Fabinho, Liverpool also needed a backup to Trent Alexander-Arnold, and they've already got him. They brought him in. He's 18 years old, Calvin Ramsey, who cost them £4.2 million from Aberdeen, who's an attacking right back who I do think will be an excellent backup to Trent. These transfers will allow Liverpool to set up like this, with these players as the alternatives. Ramsey would cost around £5 million, Kone around 35, Núñez around 75, meaning a total spend of £115 million, with players like Mane, Origi, Marco Grujic, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and Minamino bringing in around £50 to £60 million, and therefore giving Liverpool 5 top-level forwards, backup options in central midfield and defence, and the option of switching to a 4-2-3-1, with either Thiago or Kone playing alongside Fabinho, Salah and Diaz playing from the flanks as wide forwards, with Firmino playing in behind Núñez. I do also think that Klopp should potentially be looking at converting Harvey Elliott into a left back, becoming a long-term replacement to Andy Robertson, as he has all the natural attributes for a traditional winger, being a great crosser from deep and from the byline, was also having the technical ability to be able to invert into central positions and use his progressive passes to move the ball into players between the lines. His defensive ability would need to drastically improve, but he is only 19 years old. So I think these signings would put both Liverpool and Manchester City not only in a fantastic short-term position with exceptional individual quality everywhere on the pitch, but also set them up perfectly for the next 3 to 6 years as well, which will be crucial to either manager establishing a dynasty. Now we move on to the side that are better than the top 4 race but nowhere near the title, and that is Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea. Tuchel has players like Mendy, Reece James, Mateo Kovacic and Kai Havertz, who are all players who will be established starters for the coming 2 or 3 seasons at least, whilst players like Trevor Chalobah, Levi Colwill, Billy Gilmour, Conor Gallagher, Ben Chilwell, Callum Hudson-Odoi and Mason Mount are all players who I think should be fighting to establish themselves in the starting 11. I think Kalidou Koulibaly should be brought in as a near short-term to mid-term replacement for Thiago Silva, who has just 1 year left on his contract. Koulibaly could play on the left or the right of a back three with Thiago Silva centrally, with one of Colwill and Chalobah being the other starting wide centre-back. He'd cost around £35 to £40 million I'd estimate, but he's just 30 years old, so he could still be a world-class level centre-back for the next 3 seasons I would guess, so it would be a great signing for the short to mid-term, eventually replacing Thiago Silva at the centre of that back three. With Reece James at right wing back, Marcos Alonso leaving potentially and Chilwell remaining, I think Theo Hernandez should be brought in from AC Milan. The 24-year-old would be expensive, costing around £60 million I would guess, but he's already a world-class player in my opinion and would be the perfect option for that left wing back role. The double pivot would be Kovacic alongside Kante or Jorginho depending on the game, with Billy Gilmour the long-term successor to Jorginho and Gallagher to Kante, with both of those veteran Chelsea players having just 1 year to go on their contract. In the front three at the moment, either Hakim Ziyech or Mason Mount would start alongside Kai Havertz, with Timo Werner up front. To bolster that front line, I'd look to bring in Christopher Nkunku and Hugo Ekitike for £65 and £35 million respectively, and £100 million together. Chelsea could even look to do a swap deal for Nkunku, giving them Pulisic, who is worth about £45 million in my opinion, or Timo Werner for £25 million, in order to facilitate that deal. Ekitike to me is up there with some of the best under 23 strikers around. He just hasn't had his blow up season just yet, and I think if he remains in France, next season will be that season, and I could see him in 2023 costing upwards of £70 million. He gets compared stylistically to Kylian Mbappe because he can pretty much do everything, being able to drop off and link the attack, spinning behind the back line, make runs into the channels, whilst also being able to create chances for himself and for his teammates. And he's also a clinical finisher, and you can see this by the fact that he massively overperforms his non-penalty XG, and he also ranks in the 99th percentile for interceptions and mid-70s and 80s for tackles and pressures respectively, showing that he's not a liability without the ball either. Christopher Nkunku to me is exactly the same but a few stages ahead of Ekitike, being a forward who will prove he's world class next season if I had to say, after flirting with the tag last season, especially from a statistical output point of view, as he ranks in the 99th percentile for non-penalty goals and the 96th for non-penalty XG, overperforming his non-penalty XG rate by a massive 0.24 per 90, meaning that if he plays 40 games in a season and holds this yearly finishing rate, of course, he should have scored 10 more goals that season than you would have expected him to by his non-penalty XG, showing how good of a finisher he has become, was also ranking in the 90th percentile for expected assists and then the mid-50s for his progressive metrics, and despite his defensive metrics looking somewhat low, I do think he suits defending in a wide position in the midfield 4, which is what Tuchel would require of him, with Havertz or Mount doing so from the other side. I think in 3 seasons both Ekitike and Nkunku will be world class talents, so along with Theo Hernandez and Koulibaly, I think not only do these transfers make Chelsea a title challenger next season, but also for the next 3 years at least and beyond. Koulibaly and Theo are already world class in my opinion, which is the calibre of player that Chelsea need to bring in order to compete with City or Liverpool, and all of that for a total of £200 million gross, around £110 million net, with £80 to £90 million potentially being recouped from the sales of Pulisic, Werner, Alonso and Loftus-Cheek. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, subscribe to the channel and check out the description for some other videos as well, including part 2, which should be out over the next few days.